Good vibes only. It's one of those phrases that feels almost lightweight, right up until it doesn't. This is Wisdom versus Wallpaper. I'm Allen Kerber. This one's a little more complicated than most. Sometimes it's real because it's a boundary, a way of deciding, of declaring where you put your energy. Sometimes it does something else. It makes certain feelings unwelcome. It closes the door on grief. It quickly signals that some truths do not belong. Same words, very different impact. Before I bring in my guest, I want to set one distinction. When good vibes only is a personal practice, it can be healthy. When it becomes a shared rule, something shifts. It stops being about one person's boundary and starts becoming a standard everyone in the room is expected to meet. That's where the trouble begins, because rooms that only prevent high vibes are not actually safe. They're curated. Safe means you can bring what's real and it will be met. Curation means you can only bring what fits and that will be welcomed. Those are not the same thing. Most people can feel the difference, even if they can't name it. I've been in rooms where this plays out in real time. Someone shares something real in their life, a loss, some grief, a real sadness, something that actually changes the air. You can feel the room register it. Then someone steps in, polite, trying to protect the ease of the room and themselves, and basically says, let's keep the energy high. What they mean is stop feeling that here. It doesn't lighten the experience. It shuts it down. Everything gets quieter, but not in a good way. At the same time, some people arrive at this phrase after being drained, overwhelmed, or destabilized for years. For them, it isn't avoidance. It's discernment. That version is real too. So this conversation is about holding both, the phrase as boundary and the phrase as bypass, and learning to tell the difference. My guest today is a transformational coach, a wilderness rites of passage guide, a solo theater artist, and someone with a master's degree in spiritual psychology who has spent a lot of time both inside and examining the spiritual communities where this language lives. She has processed her own traumatic history publicly through performance, through the wild, and through deep relational work. She knows the difference between a room that is safe and a room that is curated, and she knows it from the inside. Welcome, Kamakshi Hart.
Kamakshi, hello. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Very exciting.
Well, I wanted to have you in on this because in this podcast, I've been exploring spiritual bypass statements, but this particular one feels like it has a couple different sides to it. So just to start with, when you hear the phrase "good vibes only," what's your first reaction?
I think it brings up feeling like the wise elder going, "Oh, that's cute."
Well, I recognize that I want to make room for the fact that that statement is often said by people who, been through a lot and are just trying to protect themselves, create some operational boundaries. So is there a healthy version of that that's existing?
There always is. If when the intent is inviting good vibes, there's got to be some good in there, of course. To have the ability to acknowledge and request is empowering. It's a good forward movement in that way, rather than just, I got to just kind of take whatever comes and deal with it.
What's the difference between protecting your peace and avoiding something real?
The protecting your peace, when there's still a part we feel we're needing to hide behind something, or we need to protect ourselves, then there's a lot of fear in there still. It's kind of like a developmental thing, I think. I think if you're really comfortable in your own skin, Certainly, I'm very aware of when I don't want to engage in something. If I can extract myself from a situation that doesn't feel like there's good vibes going
Right.
on, I have a lot of skill over many, many years of reading the room, as they say, or being able to duck and roll if I have to. The way you're describing it, which is a form of protection, a form of identifying that I don't want to go to some like negative or weird place. There can be judgment in it if it's used in a certain way, and it can be just like, oh, we're just doing good vibes, and nothing else can be included. Plus, it's the person who's saying it, their definition. Yeah, and I'm not going to allow in whatever's real.
Well, what does it look like to protect your energy without bypassing your experience?
Well, I think that's what I was saying. It's something that's been in my internal structure for so long. But as a trauma survivor, and there are many of us around, then many people will learn what I call spidey senses, of, like I was talking about, reading the room, feeling what's going on here. And that's where I think, your point of view is really valuable, because we're all at a different stage along that journey. And, identifying that, oh, maybe in the past I allowed myself to have negative stuff coming at me, hello. And many other people where I couldn't stop it. I had no control. And so a part of that healing, and like you said earlier, to be able to go, I'm not, my doors and windows are not open for that experience, because I'm sensing something that is not, or it's can be a blatantly obvious negative energy. But then there are many times where we could say those words, but it's really not going to have impact. But on further examination, if we can get past the feeling in the moment, we may be able to realize this was actually so much about the other person, not me. Or maybe it was completely about the other person and not me, depending on whether it's a stranger or somebody that I'm intimate with, or anywhere in between. So there is that, wow, how am I going to learn and stretch and grow to know things are going to be uncomfortable, or yes, maybe things were really, really, really uncomfortable. I've got to build my inner reserves and inner strength and knowing of who I am in order to be able to keep myself in that space. So really, good vibes only, the best use of it would be within myself. It'd be a conversation between me and me.
You wrote your solo show partly as a way of taking the unspoken and putting it into the world. What made that possible? What allowed you to move from a place where certain truths couldn't be said to a place where you're performing in front of theaters full of people?
It's interesting that you're asking me that question today, because I've been really sitting with all of that. I had to do as much work as I did, in order to be able to do it. So I first had the vision, the sense of a calling that just felt like it came out of nowhere, quote unquote, that said, one day you will be called upon to tell your story. I was 26. I had no idea what that story, I only knew more recent story. I didn't know the other stories that were actually hidden in repressed memories. So, but I was in New York City in the theater world, and I'd seen one person shows. So I thought, oh, I guess that's what that means. 30 years later, exactly 30 years, I was standing backstage waiting to go on for the very first performance. So, and I stood there, and I had been annoyed with myself to say the least, many times for some years. Why haven't I gotten around to doing that? Why was I putting it off? Why was I resisting it? Creating this show because it would keep coming up. And then when I was standing backstage waiting to be called to go on, and I was looking in a mirror and saying, what the hell did you get yourself into this time? Literally. And then it hit me that I could not have done it any sooner. It took 30 years to be able to walk out on stage and say do the stories, all the things that I do in the show, and barely enough time, 30 years. But what my point is the vulnerability hangover. Make no mistake, it doesn't, it didn't come easy. Doesn't come easy to say the kinds of things that I say in the show from stage, even though I got great feedback, so many positive responses. It's intense. Yeah.
What would you say to someone who has been made to feel that their darkness or their sadness or their anger or their grief is a problem?
Well, there's that saying, I didn't notice if it was in one of your chapters, was toxic positivity. And I think it goes hand in glove with the spiritual bypass. And there's more than ever, I think, really. And there's so much unconscious material going on when we try to shut each other down for feeling our grief, for having feelings, for being angry, for being human, basically. And it's the discomfort in the person who is maybe, your friend or your partner or somebody you're working with or whoever, or online, commenting out of their own discomfort. And I think it's a really apt term, toxic positivity, because it is toxic. It shuts people down, and it isn't real life. It's not, when we're self-regulated, our nervous systems are regulated, and, or we're in a place where we're feeling peaceful and calm and centered, that I could say, well, who am I with all this terrible, terrible suffering going on the planet? Who am I to be sitting on this bench on a trail, meditating and feeling that profound beauty and just dropping in, and allowing that to seep into my being, into my cells, and restore me? That's part of my resilience building, so I can show up as well of a human as I can. But I could also be another day sitting on the same bench, or sitting, which I have, me, sitting at the base of a tree, and I could be wailing in grief. I could be hitting the ground because I'm so pissed off. We go through all of it, and by showing up for it, and then there's more hope of moving through it, So it's that, and that is, but it's not, none of it's for the faint of heart, and none of it is easy, which is why people want to get those bubbles and then ask, like, please don't talk. Like, I lost a very close friend, died like 6 weeks ago, and it really sucks. Really sucks. I miss her.
Yeah.
She left really suddenly, and I'm pissed. I'm still pissed. Like, for real. And I get to have that. I can give myself all the space. Like, it's a process. Grief is a process. But I'm also somewhat careful, I admit, to speak in front of certain people, because I've been shut down.
Yeah.
I've had people that I know well say, like, really well, and actually shock me with, like, suppressing me, like saying, okay, you're good, right? You don't need to talk about that anymore, right?
Right. Grief is very untidy, and it's on its own timeline, and it really makes other people uncomfortable, because we also have a need to kind of straighten things up, and these platitudes can be thrown with great ease and impact just to kind of give them the space to quiet it down. When really just the presence of somebody, just the presence of community, the presence of somebody that's, you don't really need wisdom, because wisdom's not going to do anything for you either with grief. None of the things are going to do anything for you except the time to integrate it. So just to have somebody go, that sucks.
Yeah.
Could often be quite enough. And so
just giving people the space to feel, to be able to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm
here.
I get it. Sorry, and I'm here. Yeah. It just, for some reason, it works. Like, I've told a lot of people that as a trauma survivor, as a complex trauma survivor, you know, if I share something personally that's intense and the other person doesn't say anything, that is like the worst thing possible. And then the second worst thing is to like try to talk me out of like, oh, well, that happened a long time ago, so aren't you over that? And I've said, just all you need to say is, I am so sorry that these things happened to you. Thank you for sharing it with me. Yeah. And there's place for all of it. You know, it's, you know, there used to be traditions of, maybe in some cultures they still exist, you know, rending flesh, pulling hair out, tearing clothes, as grief ritual,
wailing.
like to really
wailing.
dramatic, really wailing. Yeah.
Yeah. The ancient cultures still have the ancient yells and the screams.
Yeah. Even like what I think about, because I take people out in nature, as you know, and then there are times or with my horses, but I just did this a couple days ago with somebody we were sitting on the ground, and she's going through a huge loss and divorce and all the things, which is at 40 years, it's a huge. And we were talking about, and she's going through this very thing, like people saying, well, just get over it and all this crap. But we were sitting there and I looked down, and while she was talking, and I've done these rituals before, really simple, but there just happened to be some dried sticks all around me. And so I was like, oh, this would be perfect. So I picked them up and just started handing them to her. And I said, you know, just as you're saying, I'm done with this. I'm done with that asshole. I'm done with whatever, you know, just break the sticks. Just break the sticks. To have something physical to do, to sit there on the ground and just break these sticks, because they're okay. They're already dead. So you can, they're dried. And there's just something we've lost most of us have not had exposure to these very, tangible, tactile, where you can stay safe. You don't have to go and blow stuff up or, act out in a way. People become so dysregulated and they have absolutely no recourse otherwise, but trying to move all that energy.
I've had a notice for many years that this culture that we are in and from is the new culture that's just amalgamated from many, and all those deep traditions get lost, and we're a very quick culture and short attention, as we know. But what we're lacking is the seasons of harvest, the seasons where people bring their issues into the community, into the dance, into the song. People dance that don't dance. People sing that can't sing. And that was important part. Like there was a part of community where this stuff was taken in and you were seen, and it wasn't rushed. And also those communities could see you better than you could see yourself sometimes, because you're just here being it, and they have a lot more circumspection of time and community and tradition, and they're not rushed to give you a platitude. They're more apt to sit there with you in that quietness. And if you were rushed to say something, they may go, hey, hold on. Not yet. You'll
Right.
get there. And so, you were held to it by, because it is part of the community, and you're part of the community, and your grief is part of the community. So you're not shut down as much as you're tended to as part of that. So you work with rites of passage and wilderness experience, which, teaches people to ask people to move through difficulty rather than around it, right? I mean, what does nature teach you that spiritual community maybe sometimes could not?
Well, that's fantastic question. Well, right off the top, it's nature. Thank goodness nature is not human. I like to have conversations with dragonflies and hummingbirds and hawks and trees, and because they remind me of the essence of who we all are. So being enveloped by places of pure being and natural beauty, we need to be receptive for it to really elevate us, to really let nature kind of show us the way and offer all kinds of things that can occur serendipitously if we slow down and pay attention, because we have ideas of things, that things are going to be a certain way. And nature doesn't comply with what our preconceived ideas are going to be. And that's really good for us.
Yeah.
Really good. It's good to be open to and be surprised. And that surprise can be that stepping stone to awe and wonder.
Yeah, nature could be is an incredible witness and communicator, right? It can witness and handle whatever you want to throw at it and communicate it back to you in the wind with great efficiency, depending on your availability to, be with it. But in case you're not, it can handle that too.
Yes, so that's a level of neutrality that it's very difficult for us to comprehend.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons it's so beneficial, because we're entering into a whole other time, space, and realm.
Yeah. Well, if someone listening realizes they've been living under the kind of pressure of, like this curated positivity, or, like a limitation to what they're able to feel, I mean, what would you want them to understand about that?
Well, I had a really embodied, somatic experience, you could say, that was at the level of epiphany. Years ago, it just came into me like a flash of, it's very much like a tree, which a tree is an incredible metaphor for so many things. But the deeper I was going, so like you think of the roots and the branches as the image, but it was also the deeper that I was going into the pain to release it, the greater the joy I then was able to experience. So I felt myself literally expanding my range of access to the whole gamut of human emotion, so that my joy factors, my joy levels when I was in that space were like just off the hook. Finding a way to do the right kind of work to be able to acknowledge whatever else is in there, so that it frees up the natural buoyancy, so that then, let's like we're talking about with indigenous cultures and villages, where it was all there, like in the circle, like I heard you were describing earlier. It's one person could be told super joyful about something, they just had a baby, whatever happened, and then somebody else just lost their they're beloved, and they're both sitting in the same circle.
Well, I really appreciate this. And I thank you for your vulnerability and showing up as you always strive to. And maybe we'll talk another time about more stuff.
I appreciate wanting to have these types of conversations. It's very rich, clearly.
What stays with me from this conversation is how similar protection and bypass can look from the outside. A person who says good vibes only because they've learned what certain environments cost them, and the person who says it because they can't stay with something difficult. Both land on the same little words, but they're coming from very different places. The work is knowing which one you're doing, not perfectly or all the time, but just honestly. If you're in a space right now that requires your grief or your anger or your confusion to stay hidden, it's worth asking whether that space is actually safe or simply curated, made to look safe. Because those are not the same thing, and you deserve to know the difference. Thank you to Kamakshi Hart. I'm Allen Kerber. This is Wisdom versus Wallpaper.